I have read almost everything that Brandon Sanderson has written, and oh my gosh, Wind and Truth, you need a better editor, bro. I don't want to yuck anybody's yum, and I enjoy these books, and I'm not here to make a video that's like, blah, the Wind and Truth is bad, and you should blah. There's a lot of moments in it that are really great and that are absolutely worth your time, but there's also hundreds of pages that could have been cut, and I want to take some time to talk through what are some of the specific repetitive things that have been growing out of control in his books over the last few years, and how could we script doctor this text, because I love it a lot, and that's one of the ways that I want to review this book. If we just look by the numbers, The Way of Kings starts at a, modest 1,000 pages, or specifically, I guess, 1,001 pages. Book 2, though, is flirting with 1,096, almost 100 pages more. But book 3 is 1,233 pages. Are you seeing a pattern? Because I am. And you can probably hear the frustration in my voice, and anyone can count and see an uptrend visually speaking. But I think that after having spent weeks of my life with this guy's work, I've earned at least a warning of please do not George Lucas this, do not Game of Thrones this, do not Frank Herbert's End of Dune writing 63 other until it becomes nonsensical, whatever. Just please learn the lesson that all the other great science fiction fantasy writers before you have had to learn the hard way. If you don't know what I mean by George Lucas, Game of Thrones, whatever, some of these authors, when they become so successful, they reach a point where they feel like they don't have to listen to anyone else's feedback, and they start to ruin their projects, or they don't end them soon enough, and they just continue them into the Netflix model of we'll just make another season until it sucks. So how do we save this Stormlight archive? Well, one of the ways that we do it is we say, shut up, internet guy, I enjoyed this book and I don't want to hear your criticism. In which case, cool, I don't care. This is not an ethically important video to me. Have a great day somewhere else. If you're as invested in the series as I am and you want to understand a little bit of why this book felt a little bit more like a slap in the face than the other books did, I think it comes down to these 3 things. 1, editing. 2, the underlying philosophy. And 3, the approach to psychology and mental health. We've already covered editing at length, and I don't want to cover it more at length because that would be deeply ironic. But on philosophical themes, what's the point of having $100,000 of debt to get a graduate degree in ethics if you can't say a pretentious sentence every now and again? These books are becoming philosophically repetitive. One of the central things that Sanderson is analyzing is the question of, can you kill to protect? I love this question. It's a very important question, and we've been thinking about it since Mistborn and the Hero of Ages, and all of these heroes go through different versions of having to ask this question. Famously, in a way of saying it without spoilers, very important character from these series ends up murking a guy with a scalpel in a medical situation, and it's very impactful and meaningful, and every time I think about it, I think that, wow, dang, that was a really cool scene. But by the time we've gotten to Wind and Truth, we're no longer doing the philosophical questions in the language of fantasy. Instead, we're doing them in the language of direct philosophy itself. He keeps saying, what is the greatest good for the greatest number? Bro, we're talking about utilitarianism. Why are we talking about utilitarianism in the framework of fantasy and not doing it through the lens of characters' decisions, instead doing it directly through the language of philosophical discussion? It's kind of annoying. And I suppose I should throw a spoiler warning on this, but in addition to being philosophically repetitive, it was also philosophically unsatisfying, because after having spent more than 1,000 pages worried about the question of utilitarianism, Dalinar is facing down an evil god who forces him to make a Abrahamic sacrifice in this. Really, it was like, oh, this is kind of cool. That's neat. And then Dalinar just says, I'm just gonna not play by your rules, and I'm just gonna void that contract somehow. What? And maybe it would be okay if it were just one of the characters and it were just some of the time, but it just felt like throughout this book, Yasna, Dalinar, we just repeatedly came back to this, what about doing the greatest good for the greatest number, and what about my principles, and blah, 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 blah. It just got to I'm just ranting because it got to the point that it was annoying, and let's talk about mental health before I just become an angry ranting internet guy. Since this is becoming much more negative than I planned, let's compliment Sandwich the mental health element of this criticism, and say that just throughout the previous 4 books, there were so many powerful, soul-stirringly powerful moments about trauma and about healing and about grief, and I can just say the words, you cannot have my pain, and the people that have read that book might start tearing up just thinking about it, and I almost do every time. The same thing happened with You Cannot Have My Sacrifice. Shallan, as a character, continuing with compliments on mental health, has dissociative identity disorder, has multiple personality disorder, as we used to call it, and is portrayed so well as having different elements of her identity form as a result of survival mechanisms in response to the childhood that she was forced to endure. And it's just so well done. Kaladin, as a character, had to be benched earlier because of his PTSD, and it's portrayed in such a human and compelling way. There's so many amazing depictions of mental health throughout these books, and as I was reading Wind and Truth, I felt like I was no longer reading excellent depictions of mental health, and instead I felt like I was reading Instagram posts telling me to love myself, and it was just not what I signed up for. And if you read this book and those moments of psychological encouragement were extremely validating to you, I'm not here to stand in your way. I'm not trying to take that away from you. I'm not trying to yuck anybody's yum, and I'm not trying to invalidate any one thing that anyone took away. The world's hard enough. If you found encouragement in those messages, absolutely take encouragement in those messages. I just personally found it like I was just scrolling through social media and hearing repeated psychological messages around like, you can't pour from an empty cup, and you better have boundaries, and you should probably love yourself before you love up. And it was just like, what? Why? I can scroll through my Instagram feed and see this. Why am I hearing fantasy characters? It just took me out of the cool sword swinging political intrigue super magic system world to be hearing these characters that I've spent weeks and weeks of my life with talking like they're on the same Instagram feed as I am. And maybe it's a me thing, and I try to be charitable to authors. I just am having trouble with this. This trend. Where does it continue? Is it just linear growth forever, and by the time we get to Stormlight 10, it's just going to be 2,000 pages, and 1,000 of the pages are going to be people just reading tweets at each other? And Szeth's son Volano, Truthless of Shenovar, is not going to be wearing white on the day that he's to kill a king. He'll be wearing full black hoods, and he'll be like, from my point of view, the Windrunners are evil. They are great books, and I love them, and I'm glad that I have some time away from them before the next one comes out. Okay, back to the nonfiction sorts of things that are the reason that this channel does well. In the first place, off screen, I read the first half of this book, The Serviceberry, which is the next book in Robin Wall Kimmerer's extended universe after reading Sweetgrass about economics, and it's really good so far. So hit sub and like and all that jazz. Buttons. I probably should have just ended on that. From my point of view, Bye.